Hey you guys, I'm Jessica with Austin Lymphatic. You know, a lot of our clients come in to see us because their doctors just told them to, and they have no idea what the lymphatic system is. And so we get asked all the time, what is the lymphatic system? Our lymphatic system is perhaps the most underrated aspect of our anatomy. It's the functional structure that houses our immune system. A healthy lymph system is critical for your well-being because it's responsible for filtering out toxins, cell waste, and fighting off bacteria, viruses, and other infections. In essence, it's really what's cleaning our blood. This process begins with our blood in the cardiovascular system, and what happens is when your heart pumps, blood pressure builds in those small blood capillaries, and as that pressure builds, the blood plasma, which contains proteins, oxygen, cell waste, immunological cells, and toxins, are all forced out through the capillary wall. You see, these capillary walls are designed for this transfer of solids by having relatively large spaces for them to move through, and you'd call this highly permeable. This is how our cells receive oxygen and nutrients, which is really, really cool. Okay, so this blood plasma is squeezed out of the capillary and into what's called the interstitial space. And this is basically like kind of the empty space in between our cells. It's all over our body. It's like we're a giant skin-covered bag of Jell-O walking around. And I think that we can all agree that Jell-O with those little pieces of fruit in it is super gross. And what our lymphatic system is responsible for is cleaning up those little fruit particles. But I'll get to that here in a little bit. As more blood plasma is squeezed out of the blood capillary, it makes it so there's now less pressure in these capillaries. Fluid is always going to flow towards the path of least resistance, or towards the least amount of pressure. So now that we have less pressure in these capillaries, some of this interstitial fluid is going to get reabsorbed back into those low pressure capillaries and back into the bloodstream to start this whole process over. This creates a flow that pushes and pulls fluids and solids in and out of the blood all over our body. This vital fluid exchange is how nutrients and other critical resources are transferred to our cells. So in summary, we have blood plasma, nutrients, proteins, fats, toxins, and immunological cells that are all pushed out of the blood vessels and into the interstitial space. This bathes our cells in healthy or toxic fluid depending on the health of the system, and then the fluids and solids are reabsorbed back into the bloodstream, effectively pumping in and out what your body needs and doesn't need. So here's where the lymphatic system itself comes into play. Not all of that fluid is going to get reabsorbed back into the blood circulatory system through those low pressure blood vessels. In fact, most of that fluid doesn't get reabsorbed, and those bigger pieces of fruit from our Jell-O analogy earlier are definitely not going to get reabsorbed. This fluid instead gets picked up by tiny lymphatic collectors, and the fluid's now known as lymph fluid, which will remain in your lymphatic system until it's been cleaned by one or more lymph node and then transported back to your heart and bloodstream, where the delivery and cleansing cycle is going to begin all over again. This is effectively dumping clean, freshly filtered fluid back into the bloodstream. Okay, so that's where the lymphatic fluid comes from. Now, exactly what happens once this interstitial fluid is picked up and becomes lymph fluid? Now let's dig into this a little bit deeper, okay? Let's start off with how lymph fluid moves and is transported around the body. So as we know, our cardiovascular system moves blood through our heart pumping. But our lymph system doesn't have a pumping mechanism like that. Instead, our lymph fluid is pushed through our bodies by little muscle contractions or big muscle contractions when we exercise. It squeezes on those lymph capillaries. And again, muscular constriction is going to create more pressure on these vessels, which is going to cause the lymph fluid to move away from the pressure. Another way our lymph fluid is pushed through the system is from pressure being created by us breathing. As we inhale, our diaphragm constricts, which pushes on the largest lymphatic duct in the body, known as the cisterna chyli. This junction is where most of the fluid in our abdomen and lower body makes its way up before re-entering the bloodstream. By keeping this lymphatic duct flowing, the rest of the fluid downstream can continue to filter through our system. I can't stress enough, you guys, how important proper breathing is. And the last thing that you should understand about how your lymphatic system works is the lymph node itself. As the lymph fluid is being pushed along towards the heart, it will first make its way to a lymph node. Your lymph nodes are these tiny little immunological hubs that hide in the nooks and crannies of your body. So we have them here in our axillary area, down here at our crease, deep in our abdomen, in our wrists, in our elbow joint. Anywhere your joints are going to flex, you have lymph nodes hiding. They hang out in these areas for several reasons. These little crevices do a wonderful job of first protecting your nodes from trauma and help push fluid along as you move and walk. This pumps your lymph nodes, allowing for more fluid to be filtered. In addition, remember, these lymph nodes supply your defense against bacteria and other infections. And if you think about it, we're most likely to get a cut or have a trauma on one of our limbs. So we have these huge patches of lymph nodes where our limbs meet our body, and this serves as kind of a vanguard defense so that infected fluid that might get into a cut that we get on our finger can't make it to our vital organs without first passing through a lymph node. So it's kind of a perfect design. So what happens when lymph fluid actually makes it to a lymph node? The lymph nodes are these little bean-shaped compartments that are divided up into specialized tissues containing immunological cells such as B cells, T cells, and macrophages. These white blood cells all have different jobs such as killing off bacteria, tagging viruses, and waste removal. Now, how does lymphatic massage work? Our lymph system is comprised in part by these incredible little lymphatic vessels known as lymphangions, and they actually constrict and push lymphatic fluid on their own. They slowly contract to push fluid towards the lymph node, and we can support and speed up this process through manual lymphatic drainage. By mechanically going in and stretching these lymphatic vessels that are just underneath the skin surface, we can open these tiny permeable valves so that fluid can enter. By mimicking the rhythm and the natural motion of these lymphangions, it helps to just speed up this process and evacuate and filter more of this fluid. This can drastically increase the amount of fluid that is filtered through your lymphatic system. You know how a stream can get real stagnant and the water becomes murky and slimy and filled with bacteria and you just kind of wouldn't want to swim in it or drink that water? It's the same thing in our bodies. When our lymph system isn't functioning efficiently and isn't moving properly, we become much more susceptible to colds and viruses and diseases. It's because we're literally unclean. When we get sick, it's due to our lymph system not being able to fight off foreign invaders quickly enough. It gets overwhelmed by them, and we're not able to keep up. When foreign invaders are abundant, white blood cells will generate more rapidly in the lymph nodes to defend the body, and then those lymph nodes are going to become swollen and tender, and they're going to hurt. And this is why you have swollen glands when you get sick. It's your lymph system doing its job. Okay, so now you have a pretty basic idea on what the lymphatic system is and how it works. If you'd like, you can check out my other videos for more specific information on what you can do to help support this system. Thanks for watching.